Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to call the special meeting of November 12th to order. Amy, if we could have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Bruins is absent. Councilmember Daniels?
Here.
Councilmember Middleton?
Present.
Vice Mayor Miller?
Here.
And Mayor Slowey.
Here. First item, public comment, and Amy, I don't believe you have received any, correct?
Correct, I do not have any public comment.
Great. All right, so then we'll jump in to our study session, Multimodal Transportation Safety Program Overview and Update. So Mary, is that you going to do the honors?
I am. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor Slowey, and members of the City Council. Mary Poole with the General Services Department. Welcome to the study session for the Multimodal Transportation Safety Program, or MMTSP. We are entering the final phase of this just over a year-long grant-funded program to develop a community-driven, transparent, and equitable process for prioritizing neighborhood traffic calming issues. The purpose of this study session is to walk through the development of the program, have an opportunity for any additional council input and questions before we bring it back for final adoption consideration on December 10th. So with that said, I will provide a brief overview of tonight's agenda and kick off the presentation. So for tonight's study session, we will provide a brief background on the MMTSP, review the program goals, the timeline and approach that we took to develop the program, share the factors that contributed, including the extensive community input, and then show you the program elements and how the program is intended to work. Finally, we will talk through the next steps to approve and implement the program. Our team with us tonight is Leslie Bloomquist and myself as the city project managers, along with some of the members of our consultant team, including Ian Conway, project manager for STEER, Sarah McMenemy, who is the community engagement manager for STEER, and then Adam Vest with the tool design team who has developed the tool. I'm now going to turn it over to Leslie to take us through the next few slides.
Thank you, Mary. So I'll just take a moment to revisit the background and history on how all this started. Each year, the General Services Department receives a significant number of requests for traffic calming and neighborhood traffic safety improvements. In 2001, the city adopted the current neighborhood traffic management program, which identifies countermeasures to be considered. Since 2001, traffic calming countermeasures have changed, improved, and new innovative measures have been developed, while others have found to be less effective. In 2011, the city adopted a complete streets philosophy, but the 2001 neighborhood traffic management program was not updated to include this new philosophy. Also, when the MMTSP program development came to fruition, we had a significant backlog of requests, and we did not have a way to prioritize them in order to allocate the limited resources and funding that was available for neighborhood traffic safety improvements. Therefore, we applied for and received a Caltrans planning grant to update the old program, incorporate new countermeasures, and develop a prioritization method and tool. In addition to these items, the grant also provided funding to develop a toolkit for resident use.
Okay, I'm in. Thank you, Amy.
This project was developed at its core to create an equitable and transparent process for the city to receive, analyze, and rank requests for neighborhood level traffic calming improvements, and to consider all modes of transportation in the review. The project is designed to update the current countermeasures and include all 4 E's in the application of the program, including engineering, education, enforcement, and engagement. The name MMTSP, or Multimodal Transportation Safety Program, incorporates this philosophy into the description of the program.
Way to get the city seal on the shirt. I like it.
Several goals were identified as part of the program development, including performing a comprehensive traffic analysis to identify safety patterns and hotspots throughout the city. Community engagement, including multiple platforms from in-person meetings, pop-up events, online surveys, social media outreach, neighborhood champion engagement with workshops and other field trips. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the outreach quickly morphed into the virtual realm, and the city hosted a Zoom webinar workshop back in April, with another one more recently this past September. Another goal is to develop a logical and community-based prioritization process, leading to a tool to assist with evaluation and prioritization of past and future resident concerns. In addition, goals included identification of potential funding sources, creation of a neighborhood toolbox to provide guidance and resources for neighborhood-led safety improvements, as well as a comprehensive written guide for the program, which will summarize the MMTSP process and be used as a resource for both the community and city staff. All of this will lead to a stronger, transparent, and equitable process to plan and program funding for improvements on an ongoing basis, and to seek additional funding for the larger, more cost-intensive projects. We do know that this process will surface priority locations on our major corridors and arterials, and we have taken this into consideration and developed a way to address these larger issues outside the MMTSP neighborhood level prioritization process, and that's through the CIP. Improvements and requests on arterial streets are typically funded with grant or other funding sources, and we will continue to leverage those grant funds for the arterials and preserve the local funds for the local roadways. This slide shows the number of requests received by the General Services Department each year for neighborhood traffic calming countermeasures. As you can see, the number of requests continues to rise, indicating there's an increasing demand for safety improvements throughout the city. However, the funding for these improvements is extremely limited, as well as the cost for ongoing maintenance of them on the local roadways that are already on the ground. Some countermeasures may be relatively low cost, such as signs and minor striping, but the majority of the requests that we get are higher cost, such as speed humps and major restriping. So I'll turn it over now to Sarah to talk about the timeline.
Thanks, Leslie. So the MMTSP has been in development over the past year through a process that combines resident input and priorities with a review of what's happening on the ground through data. To get to this point so far, we've had 3 workshops, one in the past fall in 2019, one this past spring, and then one most recently in September. And we've also had workshops led by community champions, as well as a survey to feed community preferences back into the prioritization element of the tool. Throughout this whole time, our team has been working hard to use all this information collected and feed that into the development of the MMTSP tool, which we are going to be sharing with you in a moment. And to introduce that, I'm going to pass it off to Ian.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to start out by talking at a high level about our overall approach to the program. I'm then going to go into a bit more detail about the core of the program, which is really how we take these individual requests that come in from the community, how we prioritize them, evaluate them, and move them ultimately for funding and implementation. So just a reminder, this program is really all about safety on local streets. It's not about safety on arterials like Sunrise or Greenback. So starting at a high level and talking about our approach to the program, community engagement has been a critical part of this program and has been integrated throughout. Now, the steps on the right-hand side are roughly in chronological order. So we started out by identifying safety issues and countermeasures in the community. We then developed this prioritization methodology, which, as I say, is really the core of this project. And we've been developing the program and developing a program document that will include full details of the program. And now we're moving forwards towards formal adoption and hopefully implementation early next year. So I'd like to quickly discuss some of the key program inputs. So starting at the 9 o'clock position and moving clockwise around, existing citizen requests. So there are roughly a little bit less, but roughly 1,000 requests that have come in from the community. And that's actually a valuable source of information, because by going through those requests and analyzing them, we can get a good idea of citizens' current kind of issues with safety. We did a community survey and we had an absolutely fantastic response, which is really full credit to the city. We had 352 responses to a survey on traffic safety. And this is actually a critical part of the program, because those responses reveal the preferences of the community, and those preferences are used in the prioritization to essentially go from having, say, 1,000 requests down to having a set of high priority requests that we can then look at in more detail. We have done 3 community workshops where we've garnered further input from the community. We've done a system-wide traffic safety analysis, and we've looked at previously adopted plans. So this is where things start to get a little bit more detailed. And I'm going to discuss this prioritization evaluation process, which is really at the heart of this program. So the first step is prioritization. Now, this is an automated process because we're starting with such a large number of requests that it simply wouldn't make sense to look at each and every one of those requests in a lot of detail. So we created this automated process which will take those 1,000 requests. It will sort them into a priority order. And then the second part of evaluation is where you take that tranche of really high priority requests, and then you do look at them one by one, and you look at a more kind of engineering assessment of each of those requests. Next slide, please. So looking in a little bit more detail at the first step, which is prioritization. So roughly 100 requests come in from the community every single year. And currently they come in by a variety of different means. So some would come in by phone or in person, and some by using the website. Now, an interesting part of this project is that we have set up a map which goes on the website, where the members of the community can go onto the map. They can insert their request for a safety improvement, as well as certain information that we need about it. And not only that, but they can see where the other requests are in the community. And ultimately, they will be able to see the priority level of their requests and when it gets pushed through for implementation. A key part of this project is really that transparency. So anyway, the requests come in from the community. And then this next step, which is the context criteria assessment, is really the kind of brains of it, where those requests are then prioritized. And by context criteria, we're talking about things like, is the request, is it close to a school? Is it on an emergency access route? It's geographical information that we already know about, so that we can set up this automated process. The output from here is this initial prioritized list and a map of the requests. Now, I just wanted to go through those context criteria very quickly, using these context criteria, we can assign each request a kind of low, medium, or high score. So the context criteria are things like functional classification. So what is the classification of the street? We look at equity considerations. We look if the request is close to a bus stop, or if it's near a school, if it's near a community center, senior center, if it's close to commercial or retail, if it's on the bike network, and then also if there's a sidewalk present at that location. Now, each of these different contexts, they are all weighted, and the weightings have come from the community survey that I mentioned earlier. So this is really a reflection of the community's preferences, and the whole prioritization process works based on those preferences. Next slide, please. So the second step that I mentioned is the evaluation process. So again, this is where we look at each of these requests in a little bit more detail. And it's actually a more time-consuming process. It needs significant staff time, as well as some resources, sometimes depending on the data that needs to be collected. The first step is to go out and collect data, and depending on the request, various data could be collected. For example, if it's a speeding request, then it's likely that traffic volume, so kind of traffic flows, and speed measurements would be taken. Once that data has been collected, a site-specific analysis can be done, and we can then determine the need. So is there actually a need for a countermeasure at that location? And then if there is, we can look at countermeasure selection. The idea here is that we start with the more cost-effective countermeasures. So for example, if it is a request for a speeding problem, depending on the analysis, it might be better to start with improved striping, for example, or narrowing, before moving on to something that might be a little bit more expensive, like the installation of a speed hump. So the output of this requires a little bit of engineering and economic judgment, but the output will be this final prioritized set of countermeasures that would then go for funding and implementation. Now, I'm going to hand over to Mary, who will talk about program elements.
Thank you, Ian. So next we're going to cover the program elements. And the first thing I wanted to show you was we will be having an interactive online request. It's available on the city website. It's under development now, so this is just a sense of what the community will experience. The platform will also be used by staff when taking in requests over the phone or from other methods. But essentially, requesters will be able to locate the problem location and then drop an icon on the location, which will open the form. But when they first enter the request form, they'll see this pop-up that comes up that you see at the top of your screen. And this is a little splash screen that just says, "Welcome to the Citrus Heights Multimodal Transportation Safety Plan portal." And then they will get this, will change it a little bit. They'll get some initial guidance and directions on how to use the form. We're also going to include some guidance that says, if this is a traffic violation in progress, then to contact the Citrus Heights Police Department and link them to our other online reporting system if it's a maintenance issue or some other issue that's not traffic related. As requesters open the form, they will get a pop-up with, I said that already, I'm sorry. Once they're in the form, which is what this map is, and you can kind of see that the different locations that we have put on here as a demonstration, but they'll be able, as I said, to locate their specific location. And then once they click on that, then they'll be able to open it up and use the form. There's an additional about, or if they get lost while they're entering information, then they can click this About button and just be reminded about how to use the input form. And this here is an example of the resident request form. Again, we're still fine-tuning it, but the resident request form will allow residents to select up to 3 primary issues from drop-down menus that they want us to address, such as speeding, stop sign violations, crossing safety, or lack of sidewalks or street lighting. They will also have the opportunity to choose Other, which will prompt them to fill out some additional information in a comments box. They will get a confirmation that their problem has been submitted, and they will also be able to see it on the map that they have the issue in the correct location. Once it goes through the prioritization tool, the request will show up on a public-facing interactive map for residents to track their requests and priority level. And that map looks a little bit like this. And this is just an example of how the different layers can be toggled on and off. You can use the filter icon to filter out requests by type, by year, and priority. And like a Google map, you can pan to different areas in the city, and you can also type a specific address into the search bar and it will take you there. And I'm now going to turn it over to Leslie to talk about the countermeasures.
So to expand a little bit more on what Ian mentioned earlier, this slide shows examples of 2 of the countermeasures that will be included in the toolbox. So the ones we're showing today are striping and speed humps. So once a location is prioritized for additional analysis through the tool, there would be an engineering review of the resident concerns and the identified problems to determine which countermeasures are most appropriate with the intent to implement a progressive application. An example of a progressive application would be in the case of the vehicle speeds on a local road. If it's prioritized, the engineering team would evaluate, and depending on what countermeasures identified, we would first implement narrowed travel lanes through striping, at which point we would continue to monitor the situation. And then if the issue persists, then additional measures might be implemented, such as speed humps. The goal here is really to maximize the use of the limited funding and to be able to address more and more concerns and get to the lower portions of the list as quickly as possible. All countermeasures will be identified in the MMTSP guide, and the countermeasure summaries with information, scorecards, and pictures similar to those on the screen now would be included, which leads us to the guide. And so I'll turn it back over to Sarah to lead the discussion there.
Thanks, Leslie. So Leslie's just shared 2 examples of the countermeasures that will be considered through the MMTSP. And one of the outputs of the MMTSP will be a guide to all of the different countermeasures that could be recommended through the program. And they're presented in a way that's easy to read and easy to compare information on each. Like Leslie mentioned, the guide gives an overview. It discusses advantages or disadvantages of each, and it scores measures based on how well they address specific safety concerns. And just to point out as well, countermeasures can encompass both physical treatments like speed humps or striping, like we just looked at, but they can also include non-physical strategies like community engagement or enforcement. If you want to go to the next slide, please. So one of the examples of a non-physical strategy is the MMTSP Toolbox, which has been developed to be a more resident-focused output. This toolbox provides material for promoting traffic safety within neighborhoods by residents themselves. And when putting this toolbox together, we focused on tools that were requested directly by community members through either the survey responses or through feedback that we received during the workshops. And the ones that were highlighted by folks who attended or who responded to the survey were lawn signs, stickers, and car clings. An important note on the toolbox is that it does not replace the tool or replace traffic safety countermeasures. And instead, this toolbox really works in a way that complements projects and other efforts made by the city.
And I just also wanted to mention that we will have a small stock of the neighborhood toolbox supplies, such as yard signs, similar to the Neighborhoods Association program for Keep Kids Alive when they had their sign loan program, as well as car clings and stickers. This is also a great program that's eligible under the Neighborhood Improvement Program and would be a great fit for small sponsorships by nonprofits and local community business partners. The nice thing about these items is that they're inexpensive, and the yard signs especially are set up to allow for sponsor branding.
Great, thanks, Mary. And when you take a step back and look at the multimodal transportation safety program from a high level, we just want to emphasize that it is a comprehensive program. It's made up of the prioritization process tool and the interactive map, but also the MMTSP guide and the community toolkit. And it's really not these pieces working in isolation. The program functions most effectively when all of these different pieces are working together. So the MMTSP tool will give the city a roadmap of projects to address traffic safety issues and an order in which to address these concerns. But the city will also need the support and continued engagement of community members to support traffic safety within their own neighborhoods. This complementary dual approach to of physical and non-physical strategies will support the program to be more far-reaching with the resources at hand. Next, we're just going to share a little bit about the community participation process, starting off with the goals that we had. So there were a number of goals that were set for the community participation with the idea of structuring engagement in a way that could support the wider program goals of having a transparent process and of meaningfully improving traffic safety within the city. Community participation was structured as this bi-directional communication channel. So on one hand, we really wanted community members to understand the program, to know what went into the development of it, and to have a tool at the end of this that they understand and that they trust. And on the other hand, we really wanted to ask residents to provide direct input on how projects should be prioritized so that the outputs can really align with broader community priorities. And ultimately have that very important component of this tool be completely driven by resident input. So ultimately here, we're really aiming to promote a sense of community ownership over the program and have folks who came and participate recognize the results of their efforts and their input reflected back at them in the final program. And at the same time, we're really trying to build a sense of community responsibility on a broader level for safer streets, asking folks to help promote traffic safety as part of the culture of Citrus Heights, as the residents themselves are the keeper of the culture. So one of the ways that we tried to reflect these goals back into the program was by creating a visual identity and messaging that emphasizes this idea of community power, both in the sense of participation in tool development and in the sense of promoting a culture of traffic safety within Citrus Heights. To put this forward, we developed these safe street superheroes or champions that represent the residents themselves, have the power to promote traffic safety, either through their participation in the program, and we use that message to ask people to come to meetings, to respond to the survey, to be involved with the process, and also through modeling safe driving behavior themselves and asking the same from their neighbors, from their friends, family, and from their wider community. So this approach was reflected also in our messaging, which kind of was made up of two different components. The first being, you as a resident of Citrus Heights have the power, recognizing that the ability residents have to make a difference in traffic safety in Citrus Heights. And then secondly, asking residents to use those powers that they have for good. So make a decision to actively engage in this conversation and to take more long-term local action on street safety.
Thank you, Sarah. And that's a great segue into the neighborhood champions piece of the program. And we wanted to take a quick moment to give some special recognition to our neighborhood champions. These residents have taken a very active role in supporting the development of the MMTSP, from conducting the workshops or field assessments of different and existing conditions throughout the city, to working with their neighbors to be champions of their own streets and street safety, to helping to get the word out about community and promoting participation in the online survey, and to have pledged continued involvement as the program is implemented. So thank you to our champions. We appreciate you. Neighborhood champions are a part of the overall program, and they are critical to its success. We would like to encourage everyone to be a champion, from a more formal level like Chad, Amy, Susan, and Melanie, to becoming involved in your neighborhood watch or your neighborhood association, or to just getting out, walking and biking more, and of course, modeling safe driving behavior wherever you go. We all have the ability to let our inner champion shine. And I'll turn it back over to Sarah.
Thanks, Mary. So the community participation in the MMTSP development culminated in this message, which was, we really need your help to make street safety synonymous with Citrus Heights. We need your support to get that message out there that says, as a community, we care about safety, and it starts with the folks who drive here and who travel in Citrus Heights by foot, bike, wheels, however you get around. So as the program development comes to an end, community members' role in developing the tool comes to a close, right? But the ongoing work of promoting street safety begins. And we're hoping to give folks the tools that they need to carry that on. So through the MMTSP, we're providing tools like the community focused toolbox, the guide, and the continuation of the community champion program.
Thank you, Sarah. And that takes us to our next steps. So the proposed next steps are that the program is scheduled for City Council action on December 10th. Once the program is adopted, there will be some fine tuning and additional testing before the formal launch to the public in the spring. Requests and projects will be reviewed on a quarterly basis, including in the CIP and the budget process. And this program is specifically structured to include incorporation into the 2-year budget cycle, as well as the annual budget update. This is intended not only to align with the city's budget process, but also with typical grant cycles in the state and with SACOG, which are typically every 2 years, such as ATP and the SACOG regional local programs. The quarterly program updates will allow us to be positioned for other funding opportunities, enabling us to select strategic locations to compete in upcoming grant and funding opportunities, and to factor in maintenance considerations. GSD will come back to the council regularly with an annual report. In summary, just to bring it back to program goals, this is a comprehensive program. It's utilizing the 4 E's of education, enforcement, engineering, and engagement. We have developed a transparent process that was created with community input. We have a tool that assigns priority rankings based on criteria that the community told us was important. We will have a comprehensive educational guide that explains the program and each of its elements. And we will have a dynamic toolbox that encourages neighborhoods and community partners to be engaged champions of safe streets for all modes throughout the city. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you all. Very comprehensive presentation. Appreciate it. Any of the council members have questions for staff or for our consultants?
Just one thing, not a question. I think it's very nice. It keeps, lets us track things very nicely and whatnot and prioritize. My only concern would be, is it going to discourage people from involving themselves if they have to go through a more technical, structured process? So we've seen that we pretty much have a pattern to the number of issues that come to us, and hopefully we won't see that fall off necessarily. And so I'd like us to make sure that we keep an eye on that, and or possibly have a way for people to give their complaints or their input without having to actually use the process if it's a problem for them.
Mary, didn't I understand that somebody could still call
Absolutely.
in and then staff would just enter it on their behalf, right?
Right. And the nice thing in that, and we have shared this with the community all along, is any service requests that have already been submitted, those are all being entered and run through the tool. All of those complaints residents can go and look on the map that I talked about earlier, where they can toggle off and go by year, a couple years back, see where their program request is in the process, what the ranking is. Also, if the requests are over 5 years old, because a lot of them are, we have established a process by where we will reach out to that reporting party, find out if they still live there, if it's still an issue, and just reach out and touch base with them and know that they still were heard. And then, like you just mentioned, we will continue to take calls. We'll just be entering them in through this portal so that they go through the process consistently.
So they can self-report, call in. I mean, it sounds like we got it all covered, so that's good.
Yes.
Wonderful work, everyone. Staff did a great job covering all the bases and making sure that our community is really going to be able to report these things, but also that those who are more tech savvy can just hop on the internet and look at the projects and see what's going on in our community. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, good job. So timeline, this will come, Mary, did I hear this will come back in December, and then kick off Q1?
Correct. Yes. We'll bring it back to you with you'll see the final document, what it looks like, the form, all of that in its final form. And then with your adoption, then we'll bring it forward to the community. We're thinking early spring, just because we want to make sure everything's working, and we're going to enlist our champions to help us out a little bit. So they're going to continue to stay engaged.
Good.
Great. All right, any final questions?
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, good job, Ian, Sandra, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very, very comprehensive. So look forward to see it kicked off next year. Thank you.
Thanks again.
All right, so that would be the only agenda item on our special meeting. So I know we have a separate Zoom call for the meeting at 7. So if we'll go ahead and close this out, and if I could just ask the council to come back about 5 to 7, so we can go on time, I appreciate it.
Okay.
The rest of you have a good night.